so far the inheritance we have studied so far. If I go to the book, we didn't discuss from the book still. So let me just show you what we have learned overall about inheritance. Okay, so in this chapter, we started with what is the inheritance and what is a base class and what is a derived class. So all of you should know the answer to this too. So we have talked about that how the constructors work in case of derived class. If you don't remember, see the videos that we have seen that. Then we have talked about that how the overriding works. Okay, so what is overriding? That two function will have the same name in the parent class, in the base class. So if in the base class it will change. Then we have talked about which function is used, how we can also use the parent function. Okay, all these are in the video. If you don't remember, just watch from there. Then what we have done, we have talked about class hierarchies, like when we use the hybrid inheritance. Okay, how this overall work. We have talked about a problem in the multiple inheritance, or the hybrid inheritance, that is in case of hybrid inheritance we face the diamond problem. Okay, then we have talked about the private derivation. That means whenever we're using the private members, what problem we face, how we can make sure that we can access the private variables and so on. Then we have talked about what ambiguity we face in multiple inheritance, same as the diamond problem. And now we will see that, so we know the advantages of here as well. So we have talked about all this in details. Yes, we have talked about what is the danger of protected, why we are only focusing on public and private. Okay, so we talked about that as well. So this can be considered as a question. Then is one other thing we considered, but we didn't say the name, that is called a scope of resolution. Okay, that means whenever we are accessing a variables, from where we can access it, and why. Just the example that I have discussed in the first part of this class, that is called a scope resolution of a variable. That means if I declare a variable in the parent class or in the child class, from where we can access it. Can we access it from anywhere? Okay, or how can we access it? So all the rules we have discussed that. In short, if we declare it private, you cannot access it outside of any classes. If you make it protected, you can access it from derived classes. Okay, if you make it public, you can access it from derived classes, as well as you can access it from the main function. Okay, that means outside of the class. But number three, doesn't matter where you want to access it, you will need to have an object. Without the object of that class, you will not be able to access it. So we have discussed this basics. Now, as I'm saying that in inheritance, okay, we design this program in a way so to make it efficient to create derived class. So whenever we have a repeated core, we want to use a part of a base class, okay, we just derive the class. So this part can be data, constructor, and the member functions. Okay, we can also add functionality. We need to create new improved classes, and we don't need to duplicate any code. Okay, now in the class hierarchy, this is another example. So this is one of the main reason we actually use inheritance. It's, yeah, efficiency is also one purpose, but we can also use another reason for using class is this class hierarchy. So what happens in this, as you can see, that we add functionality to the existing class. Very simple. Okay, what we do, we add, inheritance has been used to add functionality to an existing class. So that's the first thing. But there's a different purpose, that is it relates to the original design of the program. So let's look at the example without talking about the theory. Okay. So let's look at this one. So we have this employee class. Employee has a name, number. From the employee class, we have derived three classes: the manager, the scientist, and the laborer. So for the manager, we have the title and the club dues, that what the manager does. For the scientist, he's only focused on the publications, and the laborer is a different thing. So from one class, we have derived three classes. Okay, now if you look closely, look at the program. The manager class, employee class has what? It's a name and the long number. So each employee have a name and each employee have a number. So this is very simple, right? Name and number. It will have a get data function and it's a put data. The manager class, okay, which inherits the employee class, that means it inherits the name, the number. So all the employees here, okay, all the employees will add name or number. So manager will have a name, manager will have a number, he will have a title, and he will club dues. Scientist will have a name, scientist will have a number, and scientist will have publications, and laborer will have only name and number. So we just creating the get data and the put data function for each of this. Okay, so variables, get data, put data function, variables, get data, put data. And for the laborer class, okay, we don't need that much because we don't have any other variables. We can directly use the employee class. Now from here, as you can see, we create objects: manager, scientist, laborer. Okay, so for this manager class, we first call the get data function. Okay, and after we inserted the information for the manager. So when we call the get data function, what will happen if you go to the get data function for the manager? Okay, it will take input the last name and the number. So name and number will be taken input. No, sorry, not this. So manager class, it will take input the title and the ghost club. And also one thing we have seen, we can call the parent class get data function. We can call the parents class get data function from the child class. So from the manager class, we can take input of this title and golf club, and to take input the name and number, we will call the parent class get data function. So we have also seen an example of this, if you remember, or if you don't, for some reason could not attend the class, just go back to the class lectures. So we'll take all the informations that we need and then we'll print it. That's it. So what was that we did that is different? The different is we have basically implemented three different type of employees. Okay, but we used only one single class. So that is the importance is of inheritance. Okay, and finally, if you see when the program actually plays it back, the data first, the data of the manager one, then the manager two, then the scientist one, and laborer one will be printed. Okay, so that is all about our inheritance. Now finally, we have the abstract base class. So this is the last concept that I want to discuss. So we don't define any objects of the base class in the employee. Okay, we use as a general class as a whole, so act as a base class from other classes derived. So basically, if you look at this program, okay, what they're saying that in this program, did we declare any object of the employee class? No, right? So what we did, we used employee class as an abstract base class. So employee class, no object of the employee class was created, okay, directly, but we didn't define any object of the base class. But what we did, we use this base class, okay, as a platform or an abstract to derive the other classes. So this is what the concept of abstract base class comes from. So whenever we declare a class, but we don't create any object of that class, we only use it to derive objects of other classes or the derived classes. In that class, we can say this is the abstract base class. Then we have, for that we have the constructors. Okay, so in this one we didn't have actually constructors, but we have discussed one example of the constructor before. So that's all. Let me see if I have missed anything. Okay, so far what we did, we have only used the public inheritance. Okay, so until we learn polymorphism and some other complicated, we will stay in this way. We'll only use public. So we have discussed about this access modifiers in the public private, and what difference it makes at the beginning of today's class, which one is accessible and which one is not. So you can look at this example as well from the book. This is example number, this is from page 397. So it also discuss in details that which one you can access from where. So let me just give you a brief idea. So this is a private A class. This is a three variables: private data A, protected data A, and public data A. So from the class B, what we did, we inherited A. So from the function, okay, from a public function, if we try to access this private data A, it will not be accessible, but we can access the protected and the public data. We just have seen one example at the beginning of the class. Then from the another class, that is C, okay, does it goes some same, but you see that the derivation is different. It was derived public A. So far we have only discussed about, now this is a private derivation. So in case of private derivation, it actually doesn't change that much. Okay, you see in the public derivation of B, we could not access the private, but we could access the rest. But in the private derivation, we cannot access the private, but we can still access the rest. But the difference is, and between these two, between class C, which is privately derived, and class B, which is publicly derived, the difference is whenever it works for the main function. So if you go to the main function, so in the B class, which was publicly derived, if you want to access the private data, you will not be able to access it. If you want to access the protected data, you will not be able to access it. Even though it was publicly derived, we know that from the derived object, we can only access parents class public data. Okay, so but if in case of C, we cannot access A, B, any member variables of class C, because as it is privately derived, if you remember at the beginning of the course we have seen a chart. In that chart we have seen whenever we derive as a private, everything becomes private. So for the C class, even though both are derived from A, it was B was derived as a public and C was derived as a private. So in case of private derivation, we cannot access anything, all of them becomes private. And in case of public derivation, we from the main function we can access only the public. So we already discussed one example, but have a look, because these are very simple. Okay, but sometimes we what we do, we actually mess things up. So last thing, look at full screen. So how do you understand that when to use public, when to use private? Okay, so that is our last question, that how to understand this, because we're right now we're confused, because so far we have seen that we have used both. Okay, so in most cases, a derived class exists to offer an improved or more specialized version of the base class. Okay, so we create the derived class. We have seen examples such as derived classes for instances of town DN class, or have seen the student class, the manager class. Okay, so they're trying to improve the functionality. So in such cases, it makes sense for objects of the derived class to access the public function of the base class if they want to perform a basic operation. And to access the information, sorry, yeah. So in such cases, it makes sense for the objects of the derived class to access the public function of the base class if they want to perform the basic operation, and to access the function of the derived class to perform this specialist operation, we use the public derivation. So when we use public, if we want that our derived class to perform more specialized operation, and you want to improve or perform the basic operation from the public class, we use the public derivation. In some situation, we derive class is created in a way to completely modifying the operation of the base class. Okay, so we hiding or disguising the original interface. So in those cases, what we do, okay, we use the private. So you can remember any one. So if I ask you the question, when we use public, you can just remember this, and you can say, sir, okay, so other cases we use private. Okay, so that is the minimum answer. You will at least get the half mark. But if you can discuss both, that when it's a public, when it's private, you'll get the full marks. Okay, so again, to get the idea, in some cases, okay, what we want to do, we want to make sure that the base class can perform, sorry, the derived class can perform the base class basic operation, and we can also access the functions in the derived class to perform more specialized operation. So in that case, we use the public, and rest of the cases we use private. So one small line that you can remember, if you want to conceal all the functions from the object of the derived class, you can use private. If you want to conceal all the functions of the derived class from the sorry, parent class from the derived class, we can use private derivation. And we have already discussed this about the labels of inheritance. So how many we have seen this type. So these are some examples. You can go through them. So here we have find an example for multiple inheritance, multi-level inheritance, and so on. Yeah, I think we're done.